Let's just think about what BIM is. I like to be able to refer this to being better information modelling and management. We do get ourselves into so many problems, don't we, with GIS and BIM. But if we look at the purpose of what we're trying to achieve with BIM, it is about improving the way that we manage our information. So looking at it as being a process of defining, creating and delivering structured data and documents. Just as we talk about within geospatial and GIS, what we're wanting to do is make the right information available to the right person at the right time. Within the built environment and around BIM, the focus is about the whole life of built environment assets. So being very specific around the purpose and the decisions that this information should support. All too often what we find is that we get people saying BIM, virtual coordination, even GIS. No, it's just too hard. We'd much rather play around with what we're used to. So we'll work it all out as we go along with the full size mock-up. The problem we've got and the real wake-up call from a built environment perspective was the awful disaster of Grenville. And the principles that are being talked about now are very much around that golden thread of information. Okay, we say about buildings, but we're talking about infrastructure as well, that whole built environment, is that you will have a live asset, a building which is lived in, could be quite a few years old. But what we want is the intelligence, the data that actually tells the people who are refurbishing that building, in this case, the insulation, what are the design specifications? So what's the fire safety specifications that need to be fulfilled? And the manufacturers need to be able to provide data to actually verify that that is what the product will be able to do. So these are the principles now which are really focusing people's attention in the built environment, but also looking at the integrated digital built environment and smart cities, location-based mobile apps. Hallelujah, we're talking about location. So whether it's geospatial or whether it's BIM, actually what we're talking about is data, how we turn that into information, how we then facilitate better decisions. So there's a real convergence happening here. And standardization has been happening for some years now. Within the built environment, there was a real stir back in 2010 and 2011, where within the government construction strategy, a BIM mandate was talked of for April 2016. And in the build up to 2016, a series of standards were developed, the 1192 suite, to actually support managing information better within the built environment. What was happening simultaneously and wasn't really known of commonly was that actually in the UK it was decided to lift those standards to international, to ISO, and that's where I became particularly involved because I was then convener of the ISO committee, which has been overseeing the development of that at an international level. You're probably aware of the talk of BIM level 2 and BIM level 3 in those times, but what we were finding was that actually that rose to the wrong behaviours. So organisations were trying to compete and saying, well, of course, we can already do level 3. In fact, we can do level 10. What we wanted was to actually have the industry settle down, accept a framework, get on and implement it as a fundamental step towards wider digital transformation. And this is where we then decided that what we needed to do with the launch of the international standards was to talk about a UK BIM framework. What the international standards gave us the opportunity to do was to actually learn all the lessons of the last 10 or so years, but also the global lessons as well. So to be saying, no, we're not just talking about buildings, we're not just talking about construction, we're looking at this from a very wide perspective, not just of the asset owner or the asset user, but actually as ambitious as society at large. So really starting to look at the smart cities scenario. and setting information management within the right perspective, so within the context of asset and project management, but in fact organisational as well, and being very, very specific about what is the information you require to make a decision. So this is a series 19650, which have been published now. So the latest edition was in August 2020, where we've got the concepts and principles of managing information better for the built environment, but within a security-minded approach and whole life. So not only the delivery of new projects, but actually within a live environment and during the operational phase. And the UK BIM framework, which has been launched about, 2 years ago now, and there's a refreshing of the mandate, the government mandate being undertaken at the moment, is that the UK BIM framework is the overarching approach to managing information throughout the whole life of assets, making up the built environment. And it's using the ISO 19650 within a UK context. What's key to this is that there's 3 organisations supporting this. There's the British Standards Institution, which is our national standards body, the Centre of Digital Built Britain, which is supported by government through BAEs, and the UK BIM Alliance. If you go onto the website, and I'll provide a link a little bit later on, what you find is access to the whole of the ISO 19650 series and adjacent standards as well. The remaining 1192 suite, and then comprehensive guidance along with the information protocol. What we're also doing is we're making sure that we're listening to feedback that we get and developing tools to really start helping people in implementing the standards. So this is a suite of guidance that it now exists. So we've got guidance for each of the parts of the standard, but also as we get feedback, we're developing a series of themes to actually, for instance, really zoom in on developing information requirements. So I'm giving you a link here to a video. I'm not going to show it here, but it really shows you, illustrates for you the linkage between establishing a mission statement or an ambition, for instance, to fulfill a UN sustainability goal, and to be able to, from that, say, okay, that's an information requirement at the organisational level. I'm going to now commission a delivery team to deliver a specific piece of asset or to refurbish it. And this is the exchange information requirement, the information requirement I need to demonstrate that I'm meeting that sustainability goal. So do have a look at that video. One of the things we've been doing is to look at the gaps that have been holding industry back in implementing the standards, and we've really been focusing on interoperability. I'm sure that on this particular listener's audience is that you'll be familiar with what interoperability is. What we've then been doing is to actually look at, okay, so what do we need to do to actually enhance the interoperability and allow for people to implement the standards. So for instance, we've got a work stream now focusing on classification, on the AIM Common Data Environment or the Information Management Platform, and I'm looking particularly at the standard information approach. This really relates to some of the initiatives that some of you may have already been involved with, which is a collaboration between the Open Geospatial Consortium and Building Smart International, where we've been really looking at how can we work together to facilitate integrated digital built environment and that wider interoperability piece. So there's been some papers coming out on that, which I would urge you to have a look at if you haven't already. And it's been really looking at the different approaches and how we can get a convergence, or at least be clear on the specific applicability of each of the approaches and how those can work together. But what we really want to do is to work towards an information management framework which facilitates that convergence. So if you go on to the link down at the bottom here, the Centre of Digital Built Britain is really facilitating a number of activities now to allow us to move forward to that information management framework. And geospatial is a key part of that, converging with BIM as an approach. So the next steps in digital transformation really is shifting towards a national digital twin. And this comes as the result of a report of the National Infrastructure Commission, the Data for the Public Good, which recommended that we needed to set up a national digital twin with a digital framework and a task group which provides a coordination of the key players. So the principle of this is that we're really dealing with a system of systems, again, something which should be a concept familiar to you. And CDBB has recently published a report called The Flourishing Systems, which is really emphasising that we need to be thinking about the natural environment, the social and the economic infrastructure, and that construction is just a small part, and we need to be able to work with other sectors as well as an interconnected system of systems. So the National Digital Twin is an ecosystem of connected digital twins, which are enabling that smarter decisions faster across the built environment. And the benefits very much in parallel to BIM as well, to society, to economy, to business, and to the environment. So what I love about this is that it really goes back to the principles of geospatial geography, which of course is where I come from originally anyway, is that there are important elements to all of these that build up from transport, energy, water, telecoms, waste, social infrastructure, residential, commercial and industrial, and fundamentally the interface with the natural environment. This then comprises the built environment and is what we're wanting to have information which can inform the better decisions and make sure that we're really integrating those decisions in a sensible way. So the digital twin principle is something which is really quite common sense, is that you have a physical twin, you have a parallel digital twin which should be at least as valuable as an asset as the physical. So you've got data which is coming out from the physical twin, which we can then examine. We can building different scenarios, we can be experimenting, making decisions, deciding what interventions need to be made, and then communicating that back to the physical twin. So if we're looking at this as the moving parts of the transport system, for instance, with rail, obviously we would need to be interfacing with the signalling and the track, but then what we're really aiming for is an integrated transportation network. That needs to be able to interface with energy and with water. So for instance, if we're wanting a more resilient infrastructure, what happens when we do have a flood event? All three of those different sectors, which in the past would have been pretty siloed, what we're wanting to do is to integrate. This is all pretty fundamental, basic stuff that as geographers, GIS people, we've been looking at for years. What's exciting is seeing the drive now to really achieve this. And geospatial has such a key role to play within this. So this ecosystem of connected digital twins, that's our vision here, but it's guided by these Gemini principles, so that the data must have purpose. So for instance, it is for the public good, we're creating value, but we've got to be able to trust this data. So how do we do that from the point of view of security? So you may remember part 5 of ISO 19650 being the security-minded approach. But we need that data to be open, and we need to be able to define its quality and that it's appropriate for a particular use. And then, of course, we've got to make sure that we can function effectively. So we've got federation, but we've got very clear curation and governance of that data. Here are a few examples, real life project examples of being developed within Atkins, from outage planning and optimization right through to interactive decommissioning. And then these are examples drawn from the geospatial team in Atkins, demonstrating not only the use of structured data, but also then, for instance, coming in from mobile phone data, being able to monitor and start to push out through apps how actually as citizens we can respond to traffic jams and to real challenges in the transport networks, and for instance delays on the trains from a London perspective during the Olympics. Laser scanning, so actually looking at the status of existing assets and how we can actually start to be working on those in the live environment. So this is a M4 elevated section is a really good example of how we were using laser scanning, but then feeding it in and being able to control the traffic as we were doing the refurbishment. Another great example is how satellite imagery is more and more being involved in our management of the built environment. So this one of INSAR looking at subsidence, not only, for instance, for tunnelling, but then on the left-hand side, this was a fascinating one of a mud volcano, which was having large-scale impacts across a significant area. And then one of the things I really wanted to start finishing off on is that actually we've been using geospatial systems to be able to coordinate data from a whole range of different sources. So this one, where we had thousands of sensors actually monitoring subsidence during this construction of Crossrail, and being able to use artificial intelligence to be able to analyse that and to inform our responses. This is an example of a common data environment which is being run by the geospatial team. This has actually been existing for quite a while and continues to be developed. So for instance, it's being used on high speed 2 at the moment. But really what I'm trying to get to is that some of the principles we have within engineering is that it's really important that we know the status of data, whether it's work in progress and should only be seen by a particular discipline, or whether it's ready now and can be approved to be shared with other disciplines, but stating what its appropriate use will be for other disciplines. So there's the UK BIM framework. It's the overarching approach to implementing BIM in the UK, leading to the Digital Built Britain. Really exciting times, fantastic opportunities for geospatial professionals to get involved. What I'd like to leave you with is that I think we've got some real challenges, but great opportunities here, because we are heading for a hugely complex parallel virtual world. It should have the digital assets as much value as the physical. But wouldn't it be nice if it really was genuinely giving us wide insight and understanding of complex interface relationships, being inclusive, encouraging diversity of thinking, not just fast, but actually slow, reflective thinking as well. So what I'd like to leave you with is to consider innovation not just of technology, but of governance and process, and how we can still empower the human, mindfulness in action. Thank you very much for your attention. And in these rather weird and challenging times, stay safe, stay engaged, and stay inspired.